evening to you. Welcome to the program. I'm Linda Guto. Our sign language interpreter for tonight is William Sila. Now, the Kenyan opposition court is now seeking dialogue with President Uhuru Kenyatta to unlock the impasse over the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. Court leader Raila Odinga says the coalition has written a letter to President Kenyatta seeking talks on electoral reforms ahead of 2017 general election. At the same time, the chairperson of the National Assembly's Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs has requested the National Assembly Speaker for a joint sitting with the Senate to discuss electoral reforms and amendment of the IEBC Act. We're working on this story. We'll get it to you in the shortest time possible. Meanwhile, a showdown is now looming between the National Assembly and the Senate after the Constitution Implementation Oversight Committee proposed a review of the relevance and role of the Senate. The committee also wants sitting senators barred from contesting governorship positions in the coming election. KTN's Muremi Mwangi now reports on this very new battle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for protecting me.
Barely a month after the National Assembly expressed a strong objection against the allocation of 322 million shillings to senators for county oversight role, the two houses are headed for yet another round of a bitter standoff. And it has all to do with the Constitution Implementation Oversight Committee, which now wants all sitting senators barred from contesting gubernatorial seats across the 47 counties. The powerful committee also wants the relevance and role of the Senate reviewed, a move interpreted by a section of the senators to mean that the National Assembly members are scheming to send them home.
They do not call the Senate the upper house, they call it the other house. So it's normal, I'm not surprised. Members of the public should be prepared for this. It's called in English a sibling rivalry.
I said that has failed completely to be a link between the people and the governor. Maybe it's high time we said bye-bye to that institution called the Senate.
But with a number of sitting senators now eyeing the seemingly more lucrative gubernatorial seats, the Senate National Assembly face-off has now caught the eye of the Council of Governors, which now wants funding to the Senate slashed on account of not living up to its oversight role.
What is the justification of sending so much money to create another chamber above the National Assembly that cannot account for what it is doing? It spends most of its time fighting county governments. It is a great irony.
So mtu angefaa kuondoka. Ninasema kwamba ni gavana angekuwa ameondoka kitambo hata kabla ya seneta kuondoka. Kwa hivyo wao wanataka seneta aondoke, tungeongea kuhusu gavana, hatungeongea kuhusu seneta. Na hiyo kitu mzande kileta katika mbunge, nitakuwa mtu wa kwanza kupinga hiyo mzanda ya kumuondoa seneta.
Senators of declared interest are those who in their hearts are not necessarily demonstrated any gluttony with respect to pillaging of state resources, but have demonstrated a desire for good leadership.
The governors have also threatened to move to court to challenge the recently enacted CDF Act, which allocates MPs up to 2.5% of the national government revenue in CDF. The governors argue that the money should be grabbed from the MPs and channeled to the county governments.
Personally, I'm going for the money, but I'm not going for the money so that I put it to my own personal aggrandizement the way the senators are doing. I'm going for the money so that I stop the hemorrhage, so that I reduce the bill that goes for recurrent expenditure to ensure that the bill that goes for development expenditure is the bigger portion.
The biggest irony of history, that your protector is your biggest enemy. Yule alipewa kazi aenda kuchunga maslahi yako Nairobi, ndiye anashikana na wale wengine sasa kuudhi.
Now with billions of shillings headed to the counties, this latest roadblock mounted by the Constitution Implementation Oversight Committee on senators that are eyeing the gubernatorial seats is no doubt promising to be yet another battlefront in the never-ending supremacy war between the Senate and the National Assembly. Muremi Mwangi, KTN News in Nairobi.
We're keeping an eye on that battle between the two houses. Let's take you back to our top story tonight. Kenyan opposition CORD is now seeking dialogue with President Uhuru Kenyatta to unlock the impasse over the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. CORD leader Raila Odinga says the coalition has written a letter to President Kenyatta seeking talks on electoral reforms ahead of 2017 general election. At the same time, the chairperson of the National Assembly's Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs has requested the National Assembly Speaker for a joint sitting with the Senate to discuss electoral reforms and amendment of the IEBC Act.
The request by the Samuel Chepkonga-led Departmental Committee for joint sittings with their counterparts in the Senate to discuss electoral reforms might as well signal the beginning of a process to remove from office the current commissioners of the National Elections Body, IEBC, chaired by Isaac Hassan. In the recent weeks, pressure has been mounting for the IEBC to go home ahead of the 2017 polls from the church's umbrella body NCCK, the Catholic Church and Civil Society, and the opposition coalition CORD. Opposition leader Raila Odinga is now seeking to meet President Uhuru Kenyatta over the standoff.
We are very open and we really want to see a proper dialogue initiated so that an agreement is reached which can give this country a peaceful election next time.
Should Chepkonga's letter get approval from the speakers of both houses, one of the mandates of the joint committee shall include receiving views from members of the public, political parties, and national and county governments on the electoral laws and processes. The House Joint Committee will also make recommendations to Parliament on the legal, policy, and institutional reforms required to address the existing loopholes in the electoral laws. Chepkonga says for the last 2 weeks, his committee has been holding discussions on how to amend the IEBC Act 2011 on appointment of a selection panel that will appoint commissioners to the National Elections Body. Chepkonga says his committee has received 2 proposals on appointing the 7-member selection panel. One proposal is to have the majority and minority parties in the House to nominate 2 persons each. The Supreme Council of Kenya Muslims, Catholics and Evangelicals shall each nominate 1 person. According to the IEBC Act 2011 that was crafted under the Grand Coalition government, the President and the Prime Minister were to nominate 2 persons each to the selection panel. The Judicial Service Commission, Kenya Anti-Corruption Advisory Board, and the Association of Professional Societies of East Africa were to nominate 1 person each. Article 8 of the first schedule of the IEBC Act states that after the first elections under the Constitution, the 2 persons who are to be nominated by the Prime Minister shall be nominated by the President. Chepkonga says this committee feels it will be untenable and improper to allow one party which will be participating in a general election and which shall be fielding a presidential candidate to nominate 4 persons to sit on the selection panel for fresh IEBC commissioners. But even as Parliament tries to find a way out of the stalemate, the opposition and ruling Jubilee Alliance are flexing muscles.
We call upon our people to rise and defend. It is not to defend IEBC. Is to defend constitutionalism and the rule of law. That even if you want this government out, there's a way that it must be brought down. Even if you want that commission disbanded, there's a way provided in the very constitution.
Isaac Hassan is just a servant of Jubilee, not a neutral arbiter in a contest. He cannot be a referee in an electoral process where other parties are competing. When he's already trying to give another party red card by saying that the referee is biased.
The diplomatic community has called for sobriety on the future of the IEBC leadership, saying it should be achieved through dialogue and made in accord with the constitution and laws. Patrick Amimo, KTN News.
So several groups have commented on the IEBC issue. We've had from religious leaders, civil societies, diplomats, and of course we've all watched the process that have been led by CORD leaders at different IEBC offices, and today CORD leaders are asking for dialogue from President Uhuru Kenyatta. And on a big question tonight, we're asking for your opinion. What do you think? Should Uhuru Kenyatta convene a stakeholders meeting over IEBC as requested by CORD? Should Uhuru Kenyatta convene a stakeholders meeting over IEBC as requested by CORD? They're now calling for a dialogue with President Uhuru Kenyatta. Tweet us at KTN News, at KTN Kenya. You can tweet me directly at Linda Gutu. You can also send a short message to the number 22155, and we'll look through some of the feedback and sample a few. Okay, the Huruma CDF social hall that housed more than 100 households that survived the building tragedy closed today. The national government says it has allocated 6 million shillings for 168 families to meet their immediate needs, such as housing, food, and burial arrangements. Dorcas Wangira has the details.
Huruma CDF social hall Tuesday morning. Camp closed for more than 130 households that survived the tragedy. Clothes left behind, items strewn, mute witness to what was temporary relief. Yvonne Ochieng lost her sister, mother, son, and 2 nephews. When we first met her, she had hoped that they would still be alive 6 days after the building collapsed. At Daima Primary with other victims, she has tried to be strong, but it's too much for her.
There's my mom, my sister, there are 2 kids, together with my son.
There has been intervention from many quarters, humanitarian assistance, medical attention, but there remains more pressing, more basic priorities. The national government says it has milked 6 million shillings from the National Government Affirmative Fund for 198 families. For resettlement, the Cabinet Secretary for Public Service, Cicely Kariuki, says the affected households will have their rent for 2 months paid and 1 month down payment to the tune of 15,000 shillings each. For funeral arrangements, 600,000 shillings has been set apart, 20,000 shillings for each bereaved household. The number went up to 208 families. The rest given as basic household items and school material.
It is for this reason that the government also comes in to support the affected families with upwards of 6 million shillings.
10 days after the building that was on this very ground came down, the rescue operation has ended and the camp that housed the victims has been closed. The county government says 70 buildings will still have to come down.
Tutastaki serikali ya county kwa negligence. Jamii zimewekwa na wapendwa wao. Tutaenda kotini kuitisha compensation.
130 survivors left the camp today, 19 people still missing, 13 bodies were unidentified according to data availed Tuesday morning. The exercise continued for the better part of the day, but the resettlement is not immediate. Families tell us they still have to seek temporary shelter from neighbors and friends. Evicted families are also seeking for intervention. Yvonne tells us that she is yet to receive the bodies of her loved ones. She is awaiting the results of the post-mortem exam to finally have closure. Dorcas Wangira, KTN News, Nairobi.
If you're a parent or a guardian to a teenager, you need to listen to this next story. Angry villagers at Kapsoil, the outskirts of Eldoret, subjected 5 secondary school students to thorough beating after they were allegedly found engaging in sex and alcohol. The 4 boys and a girl from Uasin Gishu and Elgeyo Marakwet counties are reported to have been living together since schools opened for second term. Elvis Kosgei reports from Uasin Gishu County.
Kipkorgot Estate in the sprawling Kapsoya sublocation. Residents from far and wide thronged the homestead just to witness this drama which unfolded before our eyes. After these 5 students were allegedly found engaging in activities only fit for adults. The students aged between 15 and 17 are from schools in Uasin Gishu and neighboring counties, and are alleged to have spent their sweet time here without the knowledge of their teachers and parents since the schools opened.
Tukafika kwa the scene na tukawapata. Habari sasa ndio hii. Neighbors wanaona watoto wanatoka wanaingia ndani, wanatoka wanaingia ndani. Sasa mwenye nyumba hata walifanya hii nyumba yake ikuwe lodging. Tulipata vijana wakifanya vituko ndani na msichana. Msichana ni mmoja na vijana ni 5. pamoja na driver.
The landlord Andrew Keitany was not spared either by the irate villagers. He is alleged to have ferried these young Turks from school so that they could find a room to eat their forbidden fruit.
Kama nyumba hii sasa unaiona hapa, sana sana unakuta geti imefungwa, hauoni mtu, karibu wakati yote inafungwa. So tulikuja kugundua kwamba area hii ama nyumba hii pia imekuwa maficho kwa watoto wetu wa shule.
Kuja hapa Thursday.
So ulikuwa unalala na nani?
Ni tumepanga tukihanga out na huyu rafiki yangu.
Sasa nikamwambia sasa umwambie nani, amwambie mzazi yake. Juu sasa kuna venye mimi ningeangalia story. Sasa akaniambia yes. Alikuja Saturday. Hakuja Thursday.
Kalala na yeye.
Mimi sikulala nyumbani Saturday. Sikulala hapa Saturday.
The students' parents have been informed about their children who are currently held at Naiberi police station together with their temporary landlord. Elvis Kosgei, KTN News in Uasin Gishu County.
Let's now focus on a decision by Kenya that has caused quite a stir. The United Nations High Commission for Refugees and Human Rights activists are now calling on the government of Kenya to reconsider its decision to close refugee camps in the country. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees has warned Kenya to avoid taking any action that might be at odds with her international obligations towards people needing sanctuary from danger and persecution. The Kenya National Commission on Human Rights has also termed the move as a serious threat to the rights of refugees and asylum seekers, while appreciating that Kenya has legitimate security concerns and ongoing efforts to combat terrorism. The Kenya National Commission on Human Rights says that the blanket condemnation of all refugees and asylum seekers living in Kenya as criminals or terrorists is unfair, discriminatory, and unlawful. So that those are just some of the reactions that we are getting after Kenya made it very clear that she's no longer able to host refugees within her borders. So let's see how this plays out in the coming days. We're focusing on that story. You're watching KTN Prime. Thank you so much for staying with us. Let's focus on our big question tonight. And CORD leaders are now calling for a dialogue, of course, with President Uhuru Kenyatta just days after holding protests outside the offices of IEBC. And tonight we're asking, should Uhuru Kenyatta convene a stakeholders meeting of IEBC as requested by CORD? Here's the thing, CORD leaders are now asking for a dialogue with the president. They've been holding protests outside IEBC offices. We've heard from several different quarters on this particular issue, religious leaders, civil societies, diplomats. So do you think the president should convene a stakeholders meeting of IEBC as requested by CORD? Let us know what you think. Tweet us at KTN News, at KTN Kenya. Tweet me directly at Linda Gutu. We're already getting some of your feedback and we're thankful for them. We'll be sampling them before we end this bulletin. Let's take a short break. On that note, we'll be back. Welcome back. Thank you for staying with KTN Prime. Let's now focus on the quest for justice. And a family in Nakuru is seeking justice after their kin was killed in Usigu Shopping Center, Siaya County, by what the police termed as a stray bullet. Coletta Rose Amondi, who was a teacher at Wambasa Girls, is said to have been shot at close range by people dressed in uniforms similar to those of administration police officers. Victor Ogale has the details.
Lakini Mungu Mwenyezi alimchukua. Hivyo tu ndo mamangu alienda.
The pain of a daughter who is still mourning the death of a mother, a teacher at Wambasa Girls High School. The late Coletta Rose Amondi lost her life after she was shot dead during a robbery incident by police officers at Usigu Trading Center in Siaya County. According to a post-mortem report by Bondo Sub-County pathologist Dr. Collins Otieno Oginga, Coletta succumbed to injuries from a bullet after being shot at close range. The report says the bullet penetrated through the chest and right lung, resulting into massive bleeding that also caused a respiratory failure.
Mwenye kumpiga na bunduki kwanza aliuliza mwenzake niue. Mwenzake akasema Sasa akachapwa bunduki mbili hivi ambaye ilimlaza chini.
hata mkufanya mamangu.
The family accuses the authorities of frustrating their efforts to seek justice for the victim, who was 8 months pregnant at the time of her death. A neighbor who sought anonymity said 5 gunshots were heard in the early morning incident.
Ndio mama akasema umeniua. Nikaangalia walikuwa wawili. Wa kwanza mwenye alisema huwa alitoroka, alikuwa brown. Wa pili nilimshikilia koti, na huyo mtu wa pikipiki alitoroka sides za Lake Victoria.
On the day of the postmortem, I can't identify the policeman, but I remember this is what he told me. He's a regular police officer. He called me aside and told me, this case you have to follow because, and I quote him, hii ni tabia ya hawa watu, the APs now.
Speaking on telephone, Siaya County Criminal Investigating Officer Joseph Ongera said an inquest had been opened into the incident.
I think what we have is still a gap between the conduct of the police vis-a-vis the provisions of the Police Act.
While this family seeks justice, preliminary investigations led by acting Bondo Deputy County Commissioner Samson Akach indicated that Coletta was shot by mistake on the night of 27th March after she attempted to open the gate. Victor Ogale, KTN News.
Let's cross borders now. The death toll from Rwanda's landslide caused by torrential rains has hit 53. Today, Rwanda's government started relief operations aimed at assisting families hard hit by the disaster. Eugene Anangwe, KTN's resident reporter in Rwanda, has the details.
Relief operations are now underway in the district of Gakenke, Muhanga, Rubavu, and Ngororero, where floods and landslide destroyed homes and public infrastructure, including roads. Rwanda's Prime Minister Anastase Murekezi, along with government ministers and other officials, also joined residents of Gakenke district at the funerals of the victims of the tragedy. The Prime Minister expressed the government of Rwanda's deepest sympathies and condolences and pledged to provide all necessary support to the families of the victims and those affected. So far, the government of Rwanda has provided support in the following areas: arranged and covered the costs of the burial of all victims, availed basic support relief kits to families whose houses were destroyed. These relief kits include covers, kitchen utensils, and hygiene materials, provided tents as temporary shelter to families that would be relocated from disaster-prone areas. Meanwhile, a communique sent to newsrooms early Tuesday from the Ministry of Disaster Management and Refugee Affairs said that, in partnership with the Ministry of Agriculture, regular food support will be delivered to the families affected by the disaster. For KTN News in Kigali, Rwanda, I'm Eugene Anangwe reporting.
From Rwanda, let's take you to Uganda, where security has been heightened in the capital, Kampala, ahead of President Yoweri Museveni's swearing-in ceremony. Museveni will be sworn in on Thursday, the 12th of March, as Uganda's head of state, extending his presidency to 35 years. The opposition, however, remains under close military watch after it threatened to hold a parallel swearing-in ceremony for MDC leader Dr. Kizza Besigye. KTN Solomon Serwanja is following this story for us in Kampala, Uganda.
Kololo Independence Grounds will once again be the center of attraction as President-elect Yoweri Kaguta Museveni swears in to retain his position as head of state, a term which will extend his reign to 35 years. Preparations are near complete as the National Organizing Committee dots the I's and crosses the T's ahead of Thursday's ceremony.
So all is set. Arrivals of certain heads of state and delegations began today. It continues tomorrow. We have the final, not final, but state dinner tomorrow in the evening to usher in the men swearing in. So all is okay.
It is also time for the men in uniform, including those from the Uganda People's Defense Forces and the Uganda Police, to make drills, as they will be part of the parade for more than 5 hours during the ceremony. Security has also been beefed in the capital, Kampala, ahead of the arrival of the guests.
It's never over until it's over. We have information that there are some characters in town who think that they can organize a separate presidential swearing in, and we're saying that's unconstitutional.
A possible swearing-in ceremony of President Museveni's political rival Dr. Kizza Besigye as a parallel president on the 12th of May, promising to be another day of showdown between the police and FDC supporters. President Museveni's NRM party has, however, invited Besigye and his team to attend the swearing-in ceremony. Well, Besigye is not the only one invited. A list of 14 heads of state have confirmed invitations, including Zimbabwe's President Robert Mugabe, Tanzania's John Pombe Magufuli, and South Sudanese Salva Kiir Mayardit. Surprisingly, Kenya's Uhuru Kenyatta and Rwanda's Paul Kagame are some of the heads of state whose names are missing from the list of confirmations. Solomon Serwanja, KTN News, Kampala, Uganda.
So Solomon will cover the swearing-in ceremony for you live from Uganda on Thursday. You're watching KTN Prime. Thank you for staying with us. Let's take a short break before we look at business news. And while we're at it, Equity Bank has posted very impressive results. Lots of you would want to take a look at that. But just before we get there as well, let's remind you of a big question tonight. We're asking you if you think President Uhuru Kenyatta should convene a stakeholders meeting over IEBC as requested by CORD. CORD leaders are asking for dialogue with President Uhuru Kenyatta. Eric Barmao says, why? Problems CORD claims to solve don't actually exist. Dialogue is a solution in search of a problem. Joroge Wakabeya says, but why should Uhuru Kenyatta convene any meeting to discuss IEBC so as to satisfy one party? Finally, at Musa says, by all means, yes, we need to restore IEBC confidence that everyone will agree with. Just some of your feedback on our big question tonight, whether or not you think President Uhuru Kenyatta should convene a stakeholders meeting over IEBC as requested by CORD. Let's take a break on that note. All right, let's look at business now. The government has today inaugurated the new board for the Communication Authority of Kenya, despite a pending legal suit filed by former ousted board members and a civil rights activist. But Information and Communication Cabinet Secretary Joe Musheru insisted that the ministry was happy the matter had finally been resolved and that the new board should start work immediately.
In February this year, 7 directors at the Communication Authority of Kenya obtained court orders challenging Information and Communication Cabinet Secretary Joe Musheru's decision to replace them at the Communication Authority of Kenya.
It's been a challenge, but for us as a ministry, as a government, we're very committed to seeing that Kenya becomes, based on our Vision 2030, a digital economy.
The new board of directors replacing the ousted faction include the first CEO of the Kenya ICT Authority, Paul Kokubo. Others include Patricia Kimama, Kentis Kitolo, Mugambi Nandi, David Kitur, and Guyo Huka. Daystar's University Dean of Communication Studies, Professor Levi Obonyo, who was part of the ousted board members, has made it back to the new board.
The pain that we've actually gone through, I think at some point I was held in contempt of court. Where is John Omo? I think before then it was changed again in court. There are many things that happened, but we went through all that because we need to have a board that actually works. We need to have a board that's actually going to help us achieve that objective that we want to have.
The new board assumes office in the shadow of 2 legal suits due to be mentioned in 2 weeks' time. One of them is an appeal notice by the deposed faction led by Kipsam Choge, former CA board director and the institution's head of audit committee. Choge wants the reinstatement of the board by overturning the ruling delivered in the High Court by Justice George Odunga in May 2015 that dissolved the board. Philip Keitan, KTN Business.
An impressive performance in the first quarter of 2016 saw Equity Group post a 20% jump in its after-tax profit to 6.1 billion shillings, owing to a spike in lending through digital platform Equitel and agency banking. KTN's Abiagina reports on the bank's growth plans as well as foreseeable risks ahead of the upcoming general election.
Equity Bank managed to make a surprise comeback as it announced its first quarter results for the period ending March 2016.
The future looks very different from the past.
With a jump in after-tax profits of 20% to 5.1 billion shillings from 4.3 billion in the same period last year, an 800 million shillings rise.
The bank is generating more money than it requires for capital. We see an 8% growth in deposit, funding a 22% growth in loan book.
Equity's loan book grew to 275 billion from 224 billion shillings, anchored on investments made in alternative banking channels.
The whole 60 billion of term deposit was put in treasury bills, completely de-risking the bank.
The bank's mobile platform, Equitel, saw a steep rise, with the bank noting active users had totaled 2 million by March this year.
We kept on saying the cost-income ratio was high because of our investment in IT. That's complete. Now is to reap the benefits.
The bank, which has a regional footprint across East Africa, took a beating in some of its subsidiaries as political turmoil was experienced mainly in South Sudan subsidiary. However, Democratic Republic of Congo, where the lender set up shop in 2015, is registering high potential. With the ongoing banking sector cleanup, banks have had to revisit their banking operations to align them with the CBK and IFRS guidelines. Nonetheless, CBK maintains the banking industry in Kenya remains robust. Abi Agina, KTN Business.
Elsewhere, Vodacom is set to discontinue its M-Pesa service in South Africa at the beginning of July this year, owing to low subscriber numbers to the mobile service. The South African telecom disclosed to Reuters that M-Pesa failed to attract enough support in the home market, with little or no prospect of achieving mass users in South Africa. Vodacom cited South Africa's weak economic growth, forecast by the government to grow at less than 1% this year, and high levels of financial inclusion as reasons for withdrawing the service. However, customers in other countries like Tanzania, Lesotho, Mozambique and the DRC will not be affected by Vodacom's decision to discontinue the service in South Africa. So, if the Energy Regulatory Commission statement is anything to go by, Kenyans could in the coming months be relieved of high power tariffs owing to heavy rains that have raised water table levels, while this could see hydropower energy costs drop 2 shillings 31 cents per kilowatt. KTN's Ashley Mazuri with the details.
Power generating company Kenya Power, with rising water table levels, could see dams generating higher voltage for hydroelectric power. According to the Energy Regulatory Commission, increased hydropower generation will further cut the use of expensive thermal and ultimately reduce the monthly adjustable fuel cost charge in subsequent electricity power bills. Data from the ERC indicates that thermal power consumption grew to 114 million units, accounting for 13.5% in March from 92 million units in December, marking a 5 million units increase. Geothermal power consumption dropped to 383 million units, equivalent to 45.3% from 387 million units, while hydropower generation grew from 306.6 million kilowatts per hour in December to 334 million in March, accounting for 39.5% increase. Ashley Mazuri, KTN Business.
A very good evening and welcome to today's edition of KTN Sports.
My name is Moses Wahisi. The Kenyan para-athletes, a team that took place in the second qualifiers for the Rio Paralympics, jetted back in the country after putting an impressive performance in Marrakesh, Morocco. And as Robinson Okenya reports, the team now shift focus to this year's Rio Paralympics.
Kenya put on a stellar show in Marrakesh, Morocco in the Para-Athletics Championships, which also acted as qualifiers for the Rio Paralympics. Kenya scooped 5 gold medals, 4 silver and 3 bronze medals in the event, which saw 22 athletes make it to the team that qualified for the Paralympics. The para-athletes could not hide their joy, terming their success as a proud moment for the country, as they had to take on more experienced opponents from well-facilitated countries.
Nimefurahi sana kwa sababu nimepata gold na medal, bronze na silver. I'm very happy.
When we meet with the international body, we show the heart of the nation. This makes us strong and qualify more.
The athletes are now looking forward to taking part in the Rio Olympics, with focus being bagging more medals for Kenya.
Mimi nataka kwenda kungangana nipate medal. Siwezi sema ni gani, lakini najua naenda kupata medal because I'm sure niko na confidence with the earlier preparation ya train. I think nita make.
I know that right now, since we also have young athletes who has come, I know we have many gold in the table.
They are also calling on the government to help them access training facilities earlier for preparations.
We would kindly request the government if it would support us to actually have earlier trainings, residential trainings, maybe as from 15th of June.
The Rio Paralympic Games will take place from the 7th to the 18th of September 2016. Robinson Okenya, KTN Sports.
And we wish that side all the best in their quest to represent Kenya in the Paralympics this year. Now, betting firms SportPesa lifted the suspension of the sponsorship to the Kenyan Premier League clubs Gor Mahia and also the FC Leopards. SportPesa closed their financial taps due to cases of hooliganism, a menace that will now be tackled with different strategy, with commercializing of stewards being one of the measures on board.
Today, of course, we've lifted our suspension on our 2 Premier League teams, that is Gor Mahia and AFC Leopards. We've been in several meetings with them, and we've been able to agree on set guidelines that they're supposed to achieve on their end, and we are positive that there will be a big change in terms of security in football. And if someone causes trouble in the stadium now, they should expect to be ejected from the stadium even before the game is over.
We have also put in place a committee of that people who will be responsible for our games, especially on the Russia side of the field. And they are ready to arrest anybody and add them to the police, whoever tries to cause chaos or to throw any object on the field. So we are working as a club, we are committed, and we want to assure you that we are going to work together with our partners.
We want to see the fans who come to watch football and they engage in acts of violence, shuttling between the officers to the courts for very many times until they get tired, because that is when they will be able to know that engaging in hooliganism is going to be a costly affair.
Now, and as sports betting companies SportPesa reinstated the sponsorship to the 2 clubs, Sports Cabinet Secretary Dr. Hassan Wario elsewhere called to the Ministry of Interior to stop registering new sports betting companies here in the country. Wario was speaking during the Rules and Regulation meeting for the National Sports Fund.
The million-dollar question is, why don't we have a sports lottery? The answer is the law that we have had in Kenya up to now supports betting, not lottery. Our request to the Ministry of Interior: stop registering all these thousands of betting companies. We must control that sector. But also, the request that we were discussing with the bodies, let the law be changed so that for the first time we can have a fully fledged lottery in Kenya.
Now, Posta Rangers FC tactician Zidika Ziko Tieno is the April Sports Journalist Coach of the Month. The former Gor Mahia tactician and also Harambee Stars tactician has helped Posta Rangers to climb to the 3rd position on the Kenya Premier League log, having accumulated 21 points from 12 matches. Posta Rangers have finished off the month of April unbeaten and have been termed as title contenders if they remain consistent. Other nominees for the Coach of the Month who missed the award include Tuskers FC's Paul Nkata, Brazilian Joseph Marcelo, and James Omondi.
from the technical bench up to the management of Postal Corporation of Kenya. It's not an award for me as a person.
Now, Brazilian Sports Minister Ricardo Leis visited the Brazilian anti-doping laboratory, which opened its operation phase 3 months before the start of the Olympic Games in Rio de Janeiro. The federal government have invested a total of 151 million Brazilian reals, and that is about $42.5 million US, into the laboratory, which will function 24 hours a day, 7 days a week during the Games, with a further $12.3 million operational budget. Almost all the apparatus being used in the laboratory were imported to Brazil and will be used in the universities and the public institutions following the Games. The laboratory, which will be the sole official anti-doping outfit in Rio for the Games, whereas previous versions include Sochi in 2014 and London in 2012, have been operated temporarily anti-doping centers into additional permanent accredited laboratories in the world. As I do sign up, the team that will represent Kenya in the World Marathon, actually Eliud Kipchoge is going to be there, Stanley Biwott, Wesley Korir, and notable people will miss in the team that will go for marathon this year to represent Team Kenya is the world record holder Dennis Kimeto, and also Wilson Kipsang, who have not been that impressive this year. And also the ladies category, Hela Kiprop and Jemima Sumgong will also be there to represent Team Kenya together with Viselin Chepkesho, and we also wish them all the best when it comes to their preparation as they gear up to this year's Rio Olympic Marathon. And that's it for KTN Sports. My name is Moses Wahisi. Have a lovely night.
No longer, because I bought Mortein Doom Power Guard, which kills 100% mosquitoes. Mortein Doom Power Guard kills 100% mosquitoes.
So what do you think? Should Uhuru Kenyatta convene a stakeholders meeting over IEBC as requested by court? That was our big question tonight, on a day that the court leaders requested for dialogue with President Uhuru Kenyatta. Lots of feedback, especially on the social media, Twitter handle at KTN Kenya, at KTN News. Kazaya Mungeli says, no, the president should not. The opposition should stop using theatrics, pretending to be diplomatic after the riots they have staged. At Ankon Jugush says, no, we are not in a coalition government, no discussion necessary. Musa says by all means, yes, we need to restore IBC's confidence that everyone will agree with. Leo Kinuthia says the representatives of the stakeholders, aka 42 million plus Kenyans, sit in parliament. The letter should be sent to the speaker, referring to the letter that court leaders have sent to President Uhuru Kenyatta asking for a dialogue. Finally, Bing Charlie says President Uhuru Kenyatta has nothing to lose by convening a stakeholders forum. He should surprise the opposition. Just some of your feedback on whether or not you think President Uhuru Kenyatta should convene a stakeholders meeting over IEBC as requested by court. We thank you for tweeting us, for sending short SMSs with respect to a big question. And indeed, we thank you for watching KTN Prime. Have a good night on behalf of William Sila and I. Thank you so much for watching. For those of you on KTN News, the last word begins right now, hosted by Yvonne Okwara. We are focusing on that decision by Kenya to close refugee camps within its borders. The United Nations High Commission for Refugees and Human Rights calling on the government of Kenya to reconsider that decision. That is a conversation you really want to listen into. Thanks for watching.